Well, after raising more than $1.5 billion during her failed election campaign and ending up with $20 million in debt, it seems Kamala Harris is desperate for more cash because the vice president is still reportedly pumping Democrat donors for money weeks after the election loss. Joining us now is journalist, writer and co-founder of the Based Politics podcast, Brad Polumbo. Brad, good to see you. Look, either the Democrats have no idea how to manage money or can't read the room. I suspect both at this point. But how bad of a look is this?
It's pathetic and insulting. I mean, you blew $1 billion, including on celebrity endorsements and building six-figure podcast sets to be built up for an hour interview and then torn down. And yet you have the audacity to come to hardworking Americans who can barely afford to buy groceries, many of them, because in part due to the Biden-Harris administration's policies, and say, give us more money. We squandered it all. Now we're millions in debt. They should hang their heads in shame. But also, any American, I mean, they send these fundraising emails because they work, right? And any American who is actually still giving these people money needs to get their head checked, because you could be sending malaria nets to Africa. You could be feeding the homeless, but instead you're giving Kamala Harris more money. At this point, so people, their capacity for stupidity sometimes does amaze me, honestly.
Hey, Brad, Hollywood star George Clooney is reportedly furious that Barack Obama used him to force President Joe Biden out of the US election. Clooney's newspaper article calling for Biden to stand aside for Kamala Harris was widely credited for changing the course of the election.
You took a big swing, and thank God you hit that ball out, because
it could have gone very badly.
It could have gone very, very badly.
Go badly.
Well, listen, I don't know. I mean, it seems to be going pretty well right now, but.
Yeah, well, it did go badly for the Democrats. Kamala Harris, of course, was trounced in the polls, but Brad Clooney is now complaining that Obama, who sort of manipulated him into doing the dirty work on his behalf, has now left him to take most of the blame for the election loss.
Yeah, I mean, that take aged like milk. Obviously, we don't know how Biden would have done, but it is kind of hard to imagine he could have done that much worse than Kamala Harris. I mean, this is a historic loss. It is kind of sad in a sense that Obama and other members of the Democratic elite didn't have the courage to say publicly, yes, Joe needs to step down, and instead they outsourced that dirty work to a celebrity actor. But it did need to be said, and I will give him some credit for actually sticking his neck out there and saying, yeah, listen, this guy, he can't cut it, because we all knew it. Everyday Americans knew it, that Biden was no longer up to the job and was going to get trounced by Trump most likely. But I think where this train of thought fell apart was saying, and that's why we need to give Kamala Harris the nomination with no primary. That turned out to be a massive mistake, as anybody who was honest and followed her political career before this and knew she had the charisma of a wet blanket and cackled randomly for no reason would have told you it didn't work out very well.
Yeah, it was blatantly obvious, Brad, that it certainly didn't work out well. Now, look, the bitter banshees, still bitter from Trump's victory at The View, have thought of quite a novel idea, I'll say. I'll let them explain it.
Should Biden pardon his son, Hunter?
I think I would pardon my child. I don't even have kids. I'd bury a body for my child. We just saw Donald Trump. His indictments go away because he's in power.
One of the issues that I have is when you look at the charges that Hunter Biden was indicted on, less than 0.09% of the population is are indicted on that charge. And so it's basically close to zero. So I actually think that the only reason he was indicted is because his last name is Biden.
Right, okay, so we're talking here felony gun charges and tax evasion, Brad. But more importantly, how do you like the election result? Is there justification for this?
It's all comically absurd, but I'll say this, it is true that only a tiny amount of people are prosecuted for the crime that Hunter Biden was prosecuted for. But what she failed to mention was that Hunter Biden wrote a memoir confessing to it. He wrote a book where he detailed his extensive drug use at the exact same time that he signed a federal form to purchase a gun, attesting that he was not using drugs. So he lied on a federal form to buy a gun, which is a felony gun offense. And the Democrats are the party of big gun control advocacy here in America. So it's a glaring hypocrisy. And yet they're acting like it's no big deal, or as if he's a victim because he's Hunter Biden. I will say this, though. Morally, he did the crime. He should do the time. But if I was a lame duck president, maybe I'd pardon my son too, honestly, because you have nothing to lose. You don't have to get reelected. I wouldn't want my son to see the inside of a jail cell. So would it be the right thing to do? No. But would it be kind of understandable on a human level? I honestly have to say I think it would be.
Brad, if people think Kamala Harris lost badly in 2024, it's rumoured the Democrats are considering a candidate who could do even worse in 2028. It's being seriously reported that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez will run for president next time around. Brad and Danica, I've got to say, in a twisted, perverse kind of way, I'd like to see it.
Oh, God, help us. America would be cooked if that woman got into the Oval Office. I mean, she's a far-left ideologue. She obviously represents a tiny district in America, just a little portion of New York City that's incredibly extreme. And she does have charisma. I will give her that. I think she'd in some ways be a more compelling candidate than Kamala Harris on the stump. But she's also unhinged in many ways and has dangerous positions that would steer this country into an economic crisis. And she's also demonstrated a real disdain for our Constitution. And I really am concerned that they would see her as a legitimate candidate. But it does make sense. She's a social media star. The Democratic Party keeps sprinting further and further towards the extreme. Today's Democrats make even second-term Obama look like a moderate Republican. So if they keep on their current trajectory, I mean, AOC for president is not that hard to imagine happening, but I think it would be a dark thing for our country if she ever actually got power.
Brad, you're absolutely right. It would be a dark day indeed. Thanks for helping us make sense of America. We appreciate your time.